Going to start with a call to order.
Good morning, Josie Barnhart,
Here.
Pat Bradford,
I am here.
and Stephanie Craybill.
Here.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to approval of the agenda, and I make a motion to do that now.
Second.
All in favor?
Discussion?
Yes, ma'am.
So I would like to add back in policy 3620 because in the haste with which it was presented at the last meeting with nobody on the board except for several were allowed to look at it, including legal counsel. And the word that I needed to add some words about federal law and not just state law. And then I also wanted to discuss going forward a policy 3620R, which is a regulation about the procedures that this board expects the school district to follow, similar to we have. So I think it's an important policy to talk about now while it's still fresh.
Any further discussion? While I hear and understand the sentiment, this policy is not going to be enacted until the fall. And so I will make a note to put both policy 3620 and 3620R on the following meeting.
I don't have a 3620R. I'm saying that we should talk about it. And there are students that this affects right now who are quaking in their boots and would like for us to make sure that we're clear that we will follow federal law. And those are the wording changes that I wanted to add. I don't think it's that hard for us to add those in at this point in time and take those back. Because
Is there a second?
I'm not seconding. You already have a first and a second, and I'm having discussion.
Okay.
So
To add to the-
I'll make a motion to add that to the agenda.
Is there a second?
Madam Chair, I object to the consideration of the motion.
What the heck does that even mean? Could you explain that? Let me get it out. Let me get my book out. Tell me what page it's on so I can look up what object to consideration of motion is.
It's on the cheat sheet that you gave us.
Okay, could you show it to me? I don't have that. I have my book. Can you just read what it says?
I object to the consideration of the question. You can interrupt to use it, does not need a second, does not have debate, it is not amendable. Takes two-thirds vote to pass it.
Okay, with that, we'll vote on Ms. Bradford's objection for this time. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
No.
Okay, that passes 2-1.
Is Jason on the call with us?
Yes, I am. The practical effect of Ms. Bradford's motion is essentially a no vote on the original, but it does take precedence over the original motion to amend the agenda.
Thank you, Jason. With that, we're going to vote on Ms. Craybill's motion to amend the agenda to include that policy. All in favor? Say aye. All opposed?
No.
No.
Wait a minute, all in favor? Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Confused.
I'm sorry, so that does not pass 2-1. I will make a note, though, to put it on for further policy in March. So,
Can I make another point of question? Are we waiting for our principal rep to get here? He's an invited guest.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I do not know who that is.
Chris Madden.
Okay.
Madam Chair, can we not move forward until he arrives?
We can. I was just asking a question out of courtesy.
I appreciate that. I did not know
We invite a
legally
principal.
speaking if that we are allowed to move forward, so I just don't.
We can, because he's not an official member of the committee.
Okay. Well, when he gets here, we will definitely use his guidance as needed. So, with that, the first policy up for discussion, I think we approved the agenda. Did we approve the agenda? We did, okay. The first policy up for discussion is policy 4400, which is attendance. And this got some discussion for a couple of reasons. And I wanted to open up the floor to the policy matter experts, which I believe is Ms. Barnum for this one.
The 4400s.
Yes. Is that you? Okay. Sorry. But I'll love to open it up to you. I know previously we had talked about just some issues potentially with CPS being called and graduation credits and stuff. So if you wanted to say anything, I'd love to give you the floor this time.
Yes, thank you. So with regard to CPS being called for absences, that's for unexcused or unlawful absences. And that is also after, according to general statute, the school team and the principal will send a 3-day letter, a 6-day letter, and a 10-day letter for unexcused absences. And then upon the time that a 10-day letter is sent, they'll have a meeting with the parent or parents, legal guardians, to determine whether a good faith effort is being made for that child to be in attendance in school. And if there is no determination of a good faith effort, that's when there can be consultation on reporting either to the DA's office or to the magistrate, or reporting to CPS.
Thank you. I want to draw the policy committee's attention to page 2, big section C. It's that first paragraph, excuse me, because it says in our policy, when total absences for a student excused and unexcused exceeds 10 days, further, I'm sorry, that's the wrong portion. One sec.
I don't see any changes in here.
There's one on page 9.
Well, there's one on page 3, and there is one on page 5. And there is not a page 9.
So I think Ms. Bradford is referencing
Actually,
the
yeah.
packet. Yeah, the full packet is on our page 9, but yes, as far as policy, page 3. One minute. It was, when speaking with everybody as far as what needs to be uploaded, it was a discussion as far as the committee wants to move forward, those would be the changes that we would do. And so it's not necessarily my verbiage changes, just things that I wanted to bring to the attention that we could have a discussion about. And so that was one of the things, CPS being called, and I'm trying to find, I'm sorry.
Yeah, because that's kind of hard to follow along if we don't even know where we're looking.
Madam Chair, while we wait, can I bring something for discussion on this policy?
Yes, ma'am.
I've had a parent approach me and say her child is a national athlete and recognized as the top in her field, and it takes her away from school, and those absences aren't excused. And she's very frustrated because she's also an honor student and, looking to go into the top colleges and continue with her sport. And is there a way that we can come up with an alternative? I know the E Academy lets students who surf just use the E Academy, but is there a way to bridge what we do to where, say, a student who was a renowned gymnast or whatever the sport would be could do some remote days while they were away, and of course have documentation to say, they were competing on this day, so that these parents of these students who are excelling in what they do outside of school aren't penalized by this policy that says if they're gone for 10 or more days, then they're going to get reported to the Department of Social Services and so on and so forth. Is there something we can do there? Can we work on that?
So I'm not aware of a way to change whether that's excused or unexcused, because it's not a school-endorsed event. It's not a short-term college visit, and we have many students that have competing demands on them. I would mention that we do have some students that have to work to help support their family, and when they have to be on a shift to be able to help pay utility bills, that's not excused either. And so we have to work with all of our students individually to determine how we can ensure that their education is available to them, but that they are participating as much as appropriate.
Well, in reading this policy, under C10, which is on page 3 of the policy code, page 9 of what y'all printed out, It says, or any other reason as approved by the board in a board resolution. So it seems like we could make some way to allow that to happen, whether it has to go before a review board or something, but we're penalizing students who are high-achieving athletes and high-achieving students by them competing nationally and being away from school. And I'd like to see if there's some way that we can accommodate them.
I think that would be at the will of the board.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Ms. Crable.
All right, so in years gone past, students have come to that, like elite surfers or tennis players, and they have to go, and correct me if I'm wrong, they have to take the virtual public high school, that they are not allowed to be here, because how are we going to determine if my kid thinks he's an elite soccer player and he's going to a tournament that he chooses? That doesn't seem right. And my daughter, when she competed at college, many of her teammates had come from, equestrian programs where they did it online. And it's a choice, just like you make to go to CTEC where there's no sports. Or there's no band. So it's just one of those things that we have to families have to make those choices. So I'm not in favor at all of even bringing forward a board resolution to offer that, because it's not fair for the rest of the students who do show up.
I think as we continue this conversation, one of the things, looking at the title of C, it says excused absences, and that's also known as lawful absences, and please correct me if I'm speaking incorrectly here. And so I think that's something that, as we're looking at this from a parent side, we could make more clear by saying excused/lawful absences, to understand that it is, by law, these are the things that are allowed to be excused by the school, unless, if, like Ms. Bradford was saying, if we wanted to do a resolution of the board to create some other exceptions to the rule. But would you all be open to language change just to include, to say excused/lawful?
Where are you talking?
Absences. So the title, so page 2, when it says excused absences, we can say excused. I don't know if we want to put in parentheses lawful or lawful, but just to make that clarification even more direct for our parents who are reading this policy. And I did find where I was speaking of too.
Could we ask Mr. Weber for a weigh-in on that?
Brent. Mr. Weber, would you mind giving your insight for that?
I'd be happy to. The language used in the statute and in the State Board of Education policy, which really drives this policy, they use the term lawful absences, which in common terms means excused. So if the committee wanted to, and the board wanted to provide clarity in the titles, you could certainly do that. And just a quick point too, to the question around, expanding the list of excused absences. There is language in the state board policy that authorizes boards to create additional categories of excused absences. It's pretty vague, so it is something that if the committee is interested in exploring that I'd be happy to look into further. Changing the attendance policy also is not the only way to address expanding options for students who may be out of school for any number of reasons, whether it's, because they're engaged in sports or athletics, or because they're working to support their family. So if that is something the committee is interested in, that could certainly be studied further, whether it's by staff, or I'd be happy to assist as well as legal counsel.
I would be interested just to kind of see and gain some insight, like what Ms. Farnham had spoken about too, of just our kids who are having to work. And I think that's is that Mr. Madden? Hello, Mr. Madden. I wanted to recognize you. Thank you for being here today. But I think I would like to see what that might look like. And then we could have a discussion if we wanted to actually continue and add it to policy.
And I think that would be really important to create a regulation around, so that our schools will have an idea of how to equitably and fairly apply that to multiple types of student situations. Because, a student can feel that and a parent can feel that they're in a dire need for an excuse, and it might not be something that the school feels is appropriate. But we would want that to be fully laid out for both sides.
explicitly.
Yeah,
because
explicitly.
that gets really subjective. And yeah, I think we need to think long-term what that would insinuate, because Jason, I think we'll need to have some further conversation offline regarding this one, because that would, I know across the state that we would be doing something new.
Okay.
And I definitely don't want our board to do something that we think would be, with all good intention, that would backfire on us.
Well, and that's why, and I see you, Ms. Bradford, but that's why I said if we look into to see what that potentially could look like, I don't think that the committee is saying approving moving forward now. It's just something to explore.
And that was my point, that the superintendent mentioned. We're moving into new, and more work is remote. I mean, you can go to college, on your phone now. So I'm just looking to the future. If we've got these bright kids, they're doing well academically, so maybe there's an academic standard in there. And if they're competing at a certain level, national or whatever, but definitely have all the things that Dr. Faust mentioned. And maybe they go before a review board. I'm not trying to say make it easy, but I'm saying make it available to those parents that are being harmed otherwise.
And committee members, just another thing to consider as this discussion continues is, an absence is an absence. So it means that a student is not in attendance, whether virtually or in person, receiving instruction. And so another way that a board could, or a school district could, address these circumstances is in looking at, other options, whether it's through NCVPS or other online courses. So again, just another reason that it may make sense for staff to look at this further, to study it. And again, I'd be happy to explore further the amount of flexibility that boards have with regards to the attendance policy, but there may be other ways to address that issue as well.
My thought wasn't absent, no learning, but make up with remote work. Because if you're at a sporting event, there is time to get your classwork done in between events and so on, and at night and in the morning. So I'm not saying avoid the schoolwork, but I'm saying allow that to be done remotely during the period of the absence.
And I see you, Ms. Crable, and with that, I think that we have a limitation with the law itself as far as remote hybrid learning, and so I think that's what Ms. Crable was discussing with virtual academy. Either you're enrolled in fully virtual school or you're enrolled in traditional school, and to my knowledge, I don't believe there's a hybrid model that the state allows, and so I think I hear the intent, and I think that might be something that we can address with our legislators to talk about. Is there this room for flexibility? Is this something that New Hanover County would be interested in potentially piloting to say, could we explore this? Yes, ma'am.
And I am having a little bit of a hard time with us just talking about the elite students, because there are student athletes and there are non-student athletes who may want to try and equitably and fairly, take advantage of this, who may not be in the upper echelon. So I think that's just being kind of a little bit discriminatory, just to focus a policy on our elite students, elite, whatever that means, or our elite athlete students.
Okay.
And high achieving students.
In regards to changing the language of adding lawful excused absence, would the committee want to see that reflected every time we talk about excused absence, to just say lawful excused as we go through?
I don't think it's necessary. According to what Jason said, the NCSBA and the State Board of Education defines excused as lawful. So it's redundant. I wouldn't, sit here and, follow my sword on it, but I don't think it's necessary to go back and fact check, through all of our policies and put the wording in.
So you would be fine with just a title
Yeah.
change? Or you don't
Yeah, I
want a
mean,
title change?
I thought that's what I heard Jason say, that we can put it in the title change, but I
I
don't,
just wanted to get clarity from the
that's my
committee.
opinion.
Thank you. Ms. Bradford, did you have a hard
I
stance on
did
that?
hear Mr. Weber say we could put it into the title.
And just the title. Okay, that's fine. Moving
I
forward.
don't know
we'll
that
do
he said yes, but I heard him say it could be in the title.
and
It's
I
certainly
see-
an option that's available to you.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. And I saw where the language, if you look on page 4 of 6 of this policy, it starts on page 3, that paragraph Elementary and middle school students who are absent more than 20 days may be retained. Elementary and middle school students who are chronically absent for more than 10% of the school year will be referred to academic and/or attendance interventions. And I think, and it follows up with continued absenteeism may result in the school system notifying Department of Social Services. So I do like that it says may result there. I think that might be the worry that I've heard from parents of reading that language, that prior to the continued absenteeism, to say, my child might be referred to social services. So I just want to get clarity as we're reading that this is not a hard stance of if you have 10 or 20 for the year, 10 for each semester, unexcused and excused, that we are not directly, and maybe this is something, Mr. Madden, you'd be able to weigh in on, but that's what the fear that has come to me, and I said I'm happy to look into it, make sure that we're not just calling CPS on parents without due diligence, so.
Sure, I'll be happy to share how we do things at Wilson. It's not day 20 hard referral to the Department of Social Services. It's been a lot of communication, conversation, meetings that have taken place up to those 20 absences. And so it certainly doesn't just happen without forewarning or without some sort of intervention being put in place. Specifically, as mentioned, with the multi-tiered systematic support, system of support, NHCS, when absences begin to become a problem at 10% of the school year for attendance. So that's, I know how things are being handled. Speaking with most of my colleagues, I think it's pretty much, the social work do a really good job of reaching out to the families of those and doing home visits as well too, to sort of say how can we help, how can we support in keeping the attendance not as high as where it is.
And I see that we do a nice job of saying what the procedure is after the absences, so I appreciate that aspect of it as well.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
would you be interested in taking that will, second line, page 4 of 6, and changing it to a may? 10% of the school year may be referred for academic and/or attendance interventions? Would that make you more comfortable?
That's initially what I had wrote down with a question mark, and then I didn't know feedback from you guys what that would look like. I'm looking at you, Ms. Martin, I'm sorry.
That's fine. I heard page 4 of 6, and what section are we in?
Top of the page, second line, first word.
So because 10% of the school year is the definition for chronic absenteeism, our goal is to ensure that every student that has experienced chronic absenteeism has a problem-solving plan with a multidisciplinary team. So I would not recommend changing that to May because the team is going to be problem-solving that anyway.
And this is Jason, that may be required, the will language by State Board of Education policy. I don't have it in front of me, but before making a change there, I'd at least appreciate the opportunity to look at it further. And again, much of this is driven not only by State Board of Ed policy, but by the compulsory attendance law itself.
And just, sorry.
Yes, Dr. Frost.
Just for some clarity, we go to school per month about 22 days. And so if you subtract 10 from that, that would mean out of a month, that's a person only being in school 12 days. So if you bring it down to that side, and then you think about what the responsibilities are at the state level, and then what we're responsible for, that means a student who's been in school unexcused 12 days, that's a lot. So it may read one way on paper, and you can't lift it off paper without context. And I think what's happening is individuals may be lifting off context. So if they have questions about it, I would refer them to their principal of that building to help them understand it. But again, when you think of 10% or 10%, we're looking at 10%. What is it, maybe 90 days in a semester? So that's, of course, 9 days out of a semester that they've missed. And then you think about what the requirements are for a student, and we think about seat time. So if we do the 8 or 6 hours, and you multiply that times 8, how many hours have they missed of instruction? So that's where these are coming from. You can hit it from all sides. But we definitely, our goal is to make sure that kids are in school.
Right. And we want to see that too. I just want to make sure that some of, like I said, CPS in particular. And then the other, my last note on here, page 4, under section 2, little c, it talks about the 11th absence. In a semester shall not be awarded course credit except by determination. Does that need it to be may not be awarded course credit by, except by determination, or does the language, because I think this goes to what Ms. Bradford is kind of discussing, where we do have students who are doing well and who are going to miss more than 10 days. And so this is, if how it reads right now is that they can still get credit, like they're gonna have the opportunity to have a principal or a group of designee determined. So even though it says shall not be awarded, they're saying you will have the opportunity to be reviewed by the principal.
So again, unexcused absences. 3, we send a letter. 6, we send a letter. Is it 9? I think 10, we send a letter. So we've sent letters if they're unexcused. They're on the, under C, which says excused, we give a list of things to say. There are, I think, 9 or 10 things under there that we say. Again, these aren't going without conversations, conferences with parents. So it's not all of a sudden you hit number 11, it's like, yep, no credit is given to it. There's where we talk about the MTSS in the paragraph above. So if students are late, we're having conversations with them. If they're chronically being late, we're monitoring those things. So we put things in place that individuals wouldn't know of unless they are the recipient of it. So if you are the person who is chronically absent and unexcused, you felt this. If you're following the process and turning your notes and having those conversations, and typically if someone is going on a vacation and it's 2 weeks out, they're having a conversation with the principal. They're having conversations with the teacher, those types of things. This is actually our roadmap of we have to make sure that we do everything, but it's just not all of a sudden you miss those days and we snatch the credit from you.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm just really having a hard time with this discussion on how we're going out of our way to give students the opportunity not to be in school when many of our board members keep saying, we don't have enough time in there to do reading, writing, math, and science. And yet I don't know where this is coming from and why we're spending so much time on trying to give students the opportunity not to be there and parents the opportunity. I mean, I'm all about parent rights and I'm all about giving the kid, the benefit of the doubt, but to codify mays versus shalls, it just seems odd that we're arguing that we don't want our kids in school and we're trying to give them ways out. So I just felt the need to say that.
Thank you. That was all of the points that I had to discuss on 4400. And so at this time, if we wanted to move the changes forward to the board, or if we wanted to keep it in committee to discuss a potential review and let Jason and our staff do due diligence, I would recommend holding it in committee so we could hear about potentially those options.
So I'm keeping track
And
on my note. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, committee members, I think the initial revisions to the policy came from the School Board Association, the
Yes.
regular quarterly updates. There are a handful that were in here related to active versus inactive. I think if that's in this
Military,
one, or
yeah.
maybe I'm thinking of another one.
Page 3 and then page 5 where.
Right, with military,
Updates the
and those are driven by a new statute. So it would just be my recommendation, if there are, for the committee to move these changes forward, or at least the School Boards Association's recommended changes forward, while the remaining issues are further considered by staff, just to make sure the policy lines up with the new statute.
I would be okay with moving those changes that we discussed today forward for a vote at the board meeting on March, and I make a motion to do that. Thank you very much. So the second.
We have to vote on it if you're going to make a
I'm sorry.
motion.
Thank you, ma'am. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes 3-0. The second policy that we're discussing is survey of students. And Ms. Crable, I know the board voted to come back, but I know that you had concerns, so I'd like for you to open us in your discussion piece.
Well, first of all, when I'm trying to read through these, and it was my impression that some of the, well, first of all, I am very confused, and I am trying to read your proposed changes, the NCSBA proposed changes, and it's really hard to follow because in Assembly, we can't hover to see who made the changes. And there still are some wordings that don't jive. And I'm just concerned that we are leaving out information, but with the strikeouts and moving on things around. Also concerned that in policy 1310, which parental involvement, which you have, it was already in here, but you've made several mentions to, we're having conflicting things because policy 1310 says that we opt out of a lot of surveys, but this new policy, if I'm following correctly, is saying we opt in. And then my last point was that we had asked Ms. Varnum to put together some words for us on the pre and post assessments that have to be done with some of our curriculum. And I don't see those words in here at all. So we do have a couple things that we need to discuss. So I guess let's just start with Ms. Varna. What my suggestion would be, because we did ask her, because she had voiced a concern about that, to let her at least give us the words that she has been thinking about since our last meeting, if in fact she's been thinking about those words.
Right, and Ms., and just to your point of all the changes and things, because this was brought back to committee, the policy that got posted in Assembly was the one prior to us voting on in committee. And so, again, moving forward.
This is the same one. This is what's in Assembly right now.
Right.
And so there's some lines in here that aren't struck out, but they make no sense.
It was, I agree with you. I just saying as far as the format that we were going from, we went back, since the board sent it back, we went back to the original format of what was being discussed. I don't know what month this was at this time. So Ms. Varnum, I'll let you take the floor about concerns.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can follow which changes were made by how, but I do have some language around how we could navigate with the policy and the term survey that's used, including in curriculum materials. So we have, for example, 2 programs that are used within our health and PE courses within the healthful living curriculum that address grade level standards that are required to be taught. And the pre and post assessment for those, call those student surveys, when really they're pre and post assessment that are required by that evidence-based program. So I think my recommendation would be including a sentence such as evidence-based programs used as part of the curriculum to address grade level essential standards. When using those, the term survey often refers to the pre-assessment that is required along with the post-assessment to measure impact.
And where would you like to see that be added? Like, just for our reference.
I'm amenable to pretty much any location, as long as that's helpful in understanding that the definition of survey. So those may not be able to be opt-in. They would need to be opt-out.
Can you read that again, please?
Well, maybe we can. See, this is one of the things why we can't go through these things if we don't have something in writing to do.
Yeah.
Maybe she could type it up. Could you type it, Crystal, while she talks, so we could at least see it?
Have access to these.
I mean, no, not in that, but just, all right, we'll just have to listen. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm happy to type it somewhere.
Yeah,
I just don't have access to this one. Any evidence-based program used as a part of the curriculum to address grade level essential standards. The term survey often refers to the pre-assessment that is required, along with the post-assessment, to measure impact. So, I mean, I can certainly I don't have an access to this version of the policy, but I can download and add something in. Can you send me that? Okay.
Maybe read it one more time. It seems like there's something supposed to be on the end of that. What's the result of that?
To measure impact.
What's the result of that in this survey policy? If we're going to include language like that, how does it affect it?
To ensure that the term survey can refer to that, which would not be able to be. So to make sure they're differentiated. So while this is related to optional surveys, some surveys are required as a part of the curriculum because they are a part of pre-assessment and post-assessment to measure impact, and so those should not be considered as a part of this policy.
And I think where a lot of this concern is coming from is when you're specifically talking about mental health concerns of students and what are we doing with the data? Because I know we had a discussion of when things would be validated or invalidated, and so what are we doing with the data? And I think I would like to see if we're going to continue to keep it as an opt-out, I would love to see us include language of, I don't know if it's the board will get information of this is how we're utilizing the results of this data. I feel like the aftermath, I think, is what Ms. Bradford is getting at. And if I'm overstepping, Ms. Bradford, please let me know and jump in. But when we give a survey, it's with intent to do something in the school district. And so what does that look like? And that's going to look different for every survey, but just so that to keep informed of this is why we're doing these things that we're doing. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and specifically related to the Healthful Living curriculum. For example, one of the programs that we implement is Shifting Boundaries, and the essential standards that addresses in, for example, 6th grade is understanding healthy and effective interpersonal communication and relationships, using strategies to communicate care, consideration, respect for others, applying strategies to avoid negative peer pressure, sexual behaviors, or sexual harassment. So it does go into some sensitive topics, and it's called surveying, but they are really pre and post that are related to grade level essential standards.
So wouldn't parents want to have the right to see that before their child was involved in that? To say, yes, I want my child in this, or no, I don't want my child in this? That sounded pretty, not invasive, but something milder than invasive.
And I think if you look at page 1, Ms. Bradford at the bottom, it says upon request, parents have the right to review any survey concerns of the protected topics or instructional materials.
But we're talking about taking
But that's
some
been
things
deleted.
out of the word survey and making it a pre and post assessment. So in the healthy living curriculum that you just read from, that would not count.
And it's struck out.
So,
Committee members, sorry, go ahead, Ms. Bradford. I apologize.
Go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. So you can, my point can wait.
If parents are concerned about what their children are learning that involves sex and, inappropriateness and whatever, taking that out of letting them have the right to review it by changing the name of it from a survey to a pre or post assessment isn't gonna be good at all.
So to clarify, I wasn't referring to whether parents can review it or not. I was referring to whether there was an opt-in for the survey or an opt-out.
So whenever we're talking about sexual education, there is a survey where the parents actually have to opt in for it. We don't talk about that. Usually I think it's maybe, 5th grade when we start the body. There's something about learning about me. I don't know the terminology, but
The comprehensive sex education program. And of course,
Yes.
I don't want to speak for Patrice because this is not my instructional area. I'm referring to surveys for the part of the essential standards.
And so what happens with surveys? Well, first I would like to ask, do we know how many surveys we give per year?
Yeah, we want to know that.
With these two programs, we give those in each and maybe 2 or 3 others. It might be 5 in the total year on the topics that are in policy.
Right.
In that same paragraph on page 1, I don't know if to have a time window that parents would have access to it. Because it says they're allowed to review a survey concern, and maybe that would be to give more clear guidance and saying, hey, we want to make sure we have X amount of time to allow it. And so I don't know what that looks like, the turnaround with notifying parents and then actually taking the survey.
For both of these programs, there's a parent night and a parent education session that is in person, and then also one that's available to be virtual, where parents get to view the pre-assessment, post-assessment, and the curriculum materials.
Is that something we can just say, 2 weeks prior to any survey, surveys being presented, we would have an opportunity of a viewing window of sorts?
Yes, I think that would be very appropriate.
Ms. Farnham, one of these was Healthy Living. What was the other one? What was the title of it?
All of these are a part of the Healthy Living or Healthful Living curriculum.
Okay, all
So
right, gotcha.
it's health education grades 6 through 8.
I think she wants shifting boundaries, bringing in the bystander. I think, and what you're looking for, those titles?
That'd be lovely. I mean, because you said there are approximately 5 in total for the year, and I just, to learn.
There are roughly 5 surveys in the year, so we don't necessarily plan them out. Some of them are brought to us through the Youth Risk Behavior Survey that the state creates and really seeks our participation for state-level data. Others are related to bullying behaviors, depending upon what we need to gain from our students in order to address through resources and support. So I want to clarify, the types of surveys we do is one thing. These 2 particular ones that I'm saying aren't really surveys, that are really pre-assessment and post-assessment, are based on the Healthful Living curriculum.
So you said these 2, and that was asking for that, but.
Shifting boundaries and bringing in the bystander.
Okay, but you created a question. I'm new, and I don't know what these surveys look like. Would it be possible for me to look at these 5 surveys so that I become familiar, so that I don't take up so much time trying to understand what we're doing?
Absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you.
And committee members, along those lines, so this policy, this is driven by federal law, the Protection of People Rights Amendment, and it's designed by the School Boards Association to very closely mirror the requirements in federal law. I think, I would recommend being careful and cautious with making changes to timelines or definitions, and if there are going to be changes, for those to be in writing so we can study them further, just to make sure that that whatever the changes are, they don't conflict with the text of the PPRA. And with regards to in the PPRA itself, it sets up essentially 2 different sets of requirements. One for surveys involving protected topics that are funded by federal dollars, right? And that's where that section 1 on the first page and section 2 comes from. And, if a survey is federally funded and it involves one of those protected topics, then it does require opt-in for parents. Where districts may have more flexibility is with regards to locally funded surveys. And so I think it's important in this discussion to distinguish between, making changes to the rules around federally funded surveys where, a school district might not have much discretion, if any, since that's, governed by federal law, versus locally funded surveys. And again, just, if there are going to be changes to the language, since it does so closely mirror federal law, to have an opportunity to see those in writing and compare them to the statute, just to make sure we don't have a conflict. And then the only other thing I would add too on this topic is surveys are part of proposed legislation at the General Assembly right now. The Parents' Bill of Rights, which is working its way through the Senate, may have actually been approved. I haven't looked at it recently. It includes essentially a state version of the PPRA with a set of protected topics, and requires opt-in, and the version of the Parents' Bill of Rights is not tied to any particular funding source. So So that's just something to consider. It's working its way through the legislature, and it may impact this policy, not just for you, but for school districts across the state if that does become law.
Yeah, that was one of the questions I had, is that listening to us discuss it last time, reading through it again, it appears that, to me, that the intent of these policy changes is to make every survey that we give be an opt-in. And so that was my concern, what Mr. Weber just said. Don't we need to distinguish between Department of Education funded surveys and local surveys? Because that is important, and we can't change that. So that's been in the top of my mind with that. And as we're moving things around, I'm just trying to figure out which in here is red things that we're leaving in or red things that we're taking out. Because in sentence letter A, number 1, for the purpose of this policy, the following are considered A, that is in blue, that is what I'm guessing you inserted. And then we have these words in red that said the school system must obtain prior blah, 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 blah. And then we have, it looks to me like that was supposed to have been deleted. And then the next word would be protected topic. So I need clarity on that. It looks like it's supposed to, and if we don't delete it, then it doesn't make any sense sitting there.
I agree with you, and I think we discussed this last time. Like I said, the policy that got uploaded was just, we're starting over again. And so I don't know the color coordination of where it came from what, and I'm sorry about that. But we had discussed last time, it just, for that first paragraph, for purposes of this policy, the following are considered protected topics. So strike through the blue A and all that red line. So that would be the new first sentence. And I would suggest adding Julie's language at just the second paragraph at the top of the line. And then as we continue.
The top of what line?
Or top of the start right before A. So after the first paragraph, the second paragraph, we can add Julie's language that specifically talks about some of the courses, and let's just continue to go through page by page so that everybody can get on the same page as what is the new expectation, and we can work on typing it up to have a better draft as we present.
All right, so I don't understand the difference between and or on what are you trying to accomplish with sex behavior and taking out and putting or attitudes? Why?
I think that was a change made from NCSBA and not Josie Barnhart, so.
But the other
That's
blue
an
things are yours.
NCSBA change.
That is
The
one?
School Boards Association, I think we discussed this last time, made
Okay.
some clarifying changes just to more closely align with the text of the PPRA and to have some clarity. And I do just want to clarify the comment I made earlier with regards to, locally or state funded surveys. I do believe that boards of education have options. So if a board of education wanted to require that all surveys, be opt-in, a board could do that, but all means all. If a board of education wanted to do what the legislature is doing in the Parents' Bill of Rights and require that locally funded surveys involving protected topics are an opt-in instead of an opt-out, a board could do that too. So boards do have options, and I think where those options are is with regards to, excuse me, the locally funded or state funded surveys.
Thank you, Jason. So in looking at the first page, if we just keep going through in order, the blue and the red would change for 2 and A, and then the red keeping that. I had made a little note, if we could specifically say the school district will provide a minimum, and I'm looking at my counterparts, of a 1-week window prior to surveys to allow opportunity to view. I don't know what time frame that looks like, if 1 week is too short or it needs to be longer time frame, just to kind of give that consistency, what parents can expect when there is a survey given.
I'm open to any timeline that is, at the will of the board. We'll comply with that, not a problem.
Would you guys feel comfortable to say provide a minimum of a 1-week time window that parents may view? That way it gives flexibility, minimum saying 1 week, but potentially.
Where does that go?
It's on the bottom of page 1. if you look at the red, upon request, parents have the right after that red sentence, I had just said,
Oh,
I'm
then put in
suggesting
the time.
the schools will provide a minimum of a 1-week time window that parents may view the survey.
And I think it's kind of important that we say the ending time too, because we don't want a parent to come in and say, oh, I didn't get there in time, so therefore we're not taking the survey, or I want the whole thing held up. So I think we should be pretty clear on, we're going through it, you have this time. If you miss that time, your kid's in it, or your kid's not in it, whatever language we choose. But I'm still really confused, and I would like to see the whole thing retyped over the way we want it to be,
Yeah.
so that we can be clear on what we're opting in, what we're opting out. But yeah, my point was, schools will allow no less than 1 week, no more than 2, or something, or, up to a day, 2 days before the survey, or something like that, so that, because teachers have to be able to plan.
Right. I agree. So you'd like to see up to a week prior to the survey given?
Is that enough time, Ms. Barn? I mean, does that make sense, or, okay?
Yes, Ms. Bradford.
Yeah, I think any timeline is going to be fine because the materials will be ready. And for these two programs, there's already a parent night session
Right.
available to them.
Just in terms of intent, listening to the board attorney saying the board can say opt-in, and all means all, and he said, or we could have protected topics as opt-in. I would be in favor of either of those, but definitely the latter, where protected topics are opt-in, period. And then maybe we don't have to get into some of this minutia. I don't know. I'm just telling you, that's my intent.
I would be comfortable with that as well. Ms. Crable, what are your thoughts?
I want to see it written down before I vote on anything, because we're just, twirling around on the words. I think we need to, I can go with opt-in for protected topics and opt-out for others. But I am uncomfortable voting on anything that has this many strike-throughs and this many colors and this many discussions and this many
I can go
additions.
through and I can retype up, and there was some changes of, I don't know why some of the color for NCSBA was red and some was blue. I'm sorry that, but when I downloaded it, this is some of the things that were happening. So I can go through, and any of the strikeouts that we see, as well as page 1, we added that strike through of the A and the red, and I'll go through and retype it up to send to Crystal, and we can add in Julie's language, and Julie, I can get with you to add that paragraph and discuss, when we're discussing parental consent, we can talk about an opt-in written consent for protected topics at all levels with that.
And so you're saying we want to redo this and bring it back next month? Is that what we're saying?
That's what I'm suggesting.
And
And
that's
committee
fine.
members, I'd be happy to assist as well, again, just to compare any changes to the text of the PPRA. And I'd be happy to help with language regarding the parental consent as well. Some of which, you could even take a look at the Parent Bill of Rights, the language that's used there. It really does, it is modeled after the PPRA, but creates essentially a state version of it.
Thank you. And then my other feedback on this policy is in the case of third-party surveys, to have the board be allowed to review those surveys. And I don't know how often this comes up, but I think that that's an added sense of accountability if we put that in there. And so I don't know the premise and how often third-party surveys are distributed, but that's just my
So
thought.
question would be, for all third-party, you want a board meeting?
I don't know. I don't know how often this happens is what I just.
So
How many of them are there?
So typically, we don't get, what I'm in my head visioning is that a policy or a survey comes in March 5th. We have to wait until April or call a special board meeting for the board to review it, vote on it, and then if the deadline passes, we've missed it.
Like for grants and such, right?
I
Or
mean,
just,
it could be almost
or
anything.
DPI
Or
requirements.
like the youth risk behavior survey, so schools, districts, and schools are randomly selected to be participants, and we are, highly encouraged to be participants because the culmination and aggregation of that data leads to funding, whether it's state or federal. And we don't always have a lot of time because it's, hey, you've been selected, here's the window, it starts in 2 weeks, it ends in 3. So I'm happy to communicate anytime a survey comes
I was
up.
gonna
It
say,
just
could
may
we be
inhibit our
just-
participation.
Could we add in there to say that? And so maybe the staff is making the decision as far as whether or not we participate, but to let us be notified of this is what we're participating in, and these were the surveys given?
Yes, so I think it would be important to, and maybe Jason can weigh in on this, if it's written as notification to the board or determination of the board. So, and I think that goes to Dr. Faust's question, whether you want to, receive communication or whether you want to hold a meeting.
Well, could we first establish, how many third-party surveys did we do last year?
It depends.
one is what, I know of one that we did.
So technically, any survey that is the result of a contract would be a third party, because it's not just us creating it. So the two that I've mentioned, the one for shifting boundaries, the one for bringing in the bystander. Last year we did Panorama. We're not using that anymore. We had youth risk behavior survey, and so our policy allows local schools to survey students around bullying behaviors as well in order to create, school-led and student-led action. So I don't know the number of bullying surveys that schools created.
Okay.
We also had a Title IX survey last year that followed all those rules.
Right, Title IX survey.
Had a window, had a parent night.
Well, maybe before we hear this again, you can give us like a list, and maybe we can look at them. Nationally, parents are concerned about surveys as being an invasion of the privacy of their child. So we need to be accountable to the public on this. And if we don't know what surveys our schools are actually doing, we can't govern. So just show us what you did last year. Just show us last year's crop so we get a feel for what happened. And then I would definitely think that we should be notified, because if we get a frantic parent call, we're like, oh yeah, we saw that, so that you're empowering us. We don't have the knowledge you have yet. Maybe never. But we need to be informed on these. We don't know if there's 100 or there's 15.
So there were no more than 5 district surveys, is my clarification.
That were third party?
Yes,
So it would not be a big deal to show those to us as well.
absolutely not.
Okay, cool.
Then I would think that as we're talking about that, we need to be clear on notification versus approval. And we can't have it that one board member goes, no, I disapprove. And so then we get back to Dr. Faust's point. And we know we have board members that will do that. I've changed my mind. I've posted on a blog. So we have to be pretty specific that notification means we know about it through our board packet or some other way, and versus we are going to make an approval. But and Jason may want to weigh in on this. If we get notification and then start replying all on email, then we've essentially had a board meeting, which we don't need to get into that either.
I do have a question. Has there been something that our district has done that violated parents' rules, parents' rights with surveying?
I don't know.
I had my concern, and I brought it forth to this. I was not an elected official yet, but the Title IX survey, one of the results was implementing abuse prevention curriculum for pre-K students. That was mandatory. So we weren't even surveying that population of students. We were surveying our older students and making a change for our younger students. And so I think part of the acknowledgement of just what is happening from the results is just good to know, of like, this is why we're doing these changes, because we saw this was needed, and so this is what we're doing. And so I think just kind of more transparency, and as far as that goes, to say this is what these are the changes we're doing, and some changes have been, to train our teachers, and some changes have been curriculum changes, and some, it depends. Some we get funding for, so I think it would be good clarity to know, those results of what that looks like in our district, of whatever we're doing, surveying students, to know the results of what we're doing. Does that make sense?
It does. When the Title IX survey was given, who authorized it?
The board,
did, yeah.
the board did.
The
So
board, the board did. The Title IX
authorized that-
committee created it. It wasn't third party
wasn't
because
third
the
party.
Title IX committee created it.
That's what I'm.
And we
that's
used
what
a contractor to send it out so the results would be calculated, but the survey itself was created by the board under the Title IX committee.
Yeah,
So
okay.
the reason why I was
okay.
saying that is that we don't do surveys or give surveys that are, that would give some type of, on the line. We were given directives to give that survey from the board. And so I don't want it, my hope is that you aren't saying because that survey was given and the board authorized it, that now we are giving bad surveys or undermining, I'll say undermining parents when it comes to survey, because that's not what we did. That was a board survey that they were wanting to get into, and there was some more discussion behind closed doors about that. But
We
it was
watched,
put
we
forward.
went through the whole survey
But it
3
was
times.
not, that was not a school district, let's do this authorized, that was authorized by,
The board,
Yeah.
right.
There was no accusation in it, but what about this? What about, since we have such a robust media department, what about these surveys go under, the previous year's surveys, and any parent can go on and read them at any time they want, what we did the year before, so they can have some broad knowledge, so they're not in fear of, because nationally, surveys are a topic of conversation. There's a lot of fear around it. And so not knowing how many they are, the parent can just simply count how many they did last year. They can read them. They can know the type of survey that we in New Hanover County are doing. And I think it would give a level of transparency and some security to these people who are nervous.
so what I would actually suggest is if a parent has that concern, that they go to the school and we then sit down and explain it to them. Because putting out just random surveys, and I don't even know if we have access now to the survey, because if it goes back out, just like, for instance, the tobacco survey, I don't even know, that's North Carolina generated. I don't know where that goes.
Right.
But we still have a copy of it somewhere,
No,
right?
We don't receive access to the entire survey when it comes to youth risk behavior
Right.
survey, and also for validity, we don't actually have, like, we have samples of surveys, but we don't have the actual surveys, and when we do have an opportunity to preview them, we can't release them because it violates the validity and the fidelity of the survey. So I won't be able to post them on a website or send them in
advance. I'm talking about
Afterwards.
post.
and
Afterwards.
still in the past, entities don't release their surveys because then the results are invalidated.
Okay, I gotta process that, but you just said that surveys are administered to our students, that none of y'all have actually seen the survey, all of it. You've seen maybe a sample of it. Doesn't that cause anybody else any concern?
It doesn't, because if it's coming from the feds or it's coming from the state, it's federally approved, it's state approved. So that doesn't cause any problem. I'll be honest, as a parent, it doesn't. I have never, ever felt that my children, my 2 children, my birth children, have been violated by a survey. I don't believe what I feel, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not looking for that, but what I feel most about is what they get on their cell phones, what they have access to. That's where I put limits on. A survey from the school, from the district, like, we have to abide by so many laws and ethical, legal rules that I think what in our head, what we're thinking, or what some may be thinking is getting in, it's anonymous, so the information doesn't come back and says, Charles Faust answered this way. It doesn't. It comes back almost in a form of this subgroup, this is what this, but you're all into that data, so there's no way for me to actually pull back in most of the data to say what Charles, or if I were to say my child, how did she respond to this? she's not able to.
I think I would be comfortable with the board being notified after, about a survey given, as well as, like I said, the results of what we're doing with those survey results. I think to me, that is where, the intent and the conversation has been about, of like, what are we doing these results and what does that look like? Because like you're saying, it's being responsive to the needs of of our schools, and it looks different sometimes at different schools. So we have school level and district level surveys too. But I think it's just, good knowledge capture for us as part of the board. Yes, ma'am.
And I would caution us from taking information that parents give us at face value, because the example that you just gave, I never had heard before, because we did not survey preschool.
We did, you're right.
We surveyed middle school and high school, and every program that came from that was directly affecting middle and high school. Nothing affected pre-K. So that analogy doesn't even prove any points here.
That was a discussion, and I called our Title IX director of saying after in the discussion in a Title IX committee, that there was going to be implementation for pre-K students for sex education abuse prevention. And I was very alarmed by that decision and discussion of the board. So it did not come to fruition.
That wasn't a decision of the board. It was a discussion, and it was vetoed. We didn't do it.
I know. And
it wasn't because of one person making a call. It was because we didn't think it was the right thing to do, and had nothing to do with our survey.
Madam Chair, I call for orders of the day. Can we go back to the agenda, please?
We are on the agenda.
And so with that, I will type up what we have adjusted and discussed, and we can put it at our policy meeting just for our overview for next month. Crystal will do.
She'll listen to.
Okay, and then Crystal will do that to change those changes made, so that we can look and have just a clearer copy of making sure that we're all on the same page.
Okay, so before we go through that, on page 2, the number 2, little letter C, because I don't quite know who's the blue and the parental consent. It says the parent or eligible student must provide written consent. So what does that mean? Someone who's 18 years old? Because there could be any number of kids that's going, I'm not doing it. Or I'm doing it because all my friends are. I don't care what my mom said. So what does that mean? Was that something from the
It
NCSBA?
was something from the NCSBA, but I think you provide a good question here, is if we are going to have an opt-out of certain topics, I do think we should have a universal form for opting out of surveys so that we can have good documentation.
But what is an eligible student? Is it somebody who's,
I don't know.
I would assume it would be somebody who's 18 years old.
Because, yeah, then
And
they're
this
no
is
longer minor.
Jason. I don't have it in front of me, but again, much of this, if not the entire thing, flows from federal law where that term could be defined. I'm assuming it's similar to FERPA, where an eligible student would be a student who's 18 or emancipated. If less than 18.
Okay, and before we move on, I just wanted to call attention to letter D, where we have called it other relevant policies, and we have included in there policy 1310, which we adopted back in October. Well, we adopted it in November 2020, and we revised it in October. But if we are changing the wording of this policy, we definitely have to cross-reference it with that 1310, because in letter D of D9, it talks to us about permission slips required for students to play sports. And number 2, in B29, it talks about we will not discriminate based on gender and gender identity, and which we could possibly be doing with 3620 that we decided not to talk about again today. So those, I think we need to, as we're putting together the new words, we're going to have to look at that in conjunction with policy 1310/4002.
Thank you for that. And Jason, I know you had said that a lot of it's coming from federal, but what from my understanding of what we've been talking about today is just kind of giving more guidance, and so I don't believe that this is changing the initial intent of the changes that came from NCSBA is what I assume. But I would like to add in there to have a universal opt-out form so that we have documentation of parents who do not wish to have their kids surveyed, and they have documentation of doing that. And so that can just be under parental consent that New Hanover
Universal
County.
means what? Like you pull
Just-
one lever and they're.
Right, so you can look up and say, New Hanover County Schools, here's the opt-out of survey form. So if I get a notification or somebody gets a notification saying that a survey is being done and I don't want my child to participate, I can just sign a form. Then, Mr. Madden has a copy that says, Josie Barnhart's kids aren't doing this. And then it's just documentation for it.
Would we need to codify that like in a -R, or is that just a procedural thing that any other form like the athletic form that people, when they sign up for, was that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, just to have a consistent form like that.
And to be posted online somewhere, or?
I think what we could do is like we do if a parent doesn't want their child photographed.
Yeah,
And so,
Okay.
principal admin knows that these 5 kids don't get it, and it's like a universal.
okay. All right, so for our documentation purposes, we
can keep it in, I'm going to recommend that we keep this in committee just so that we can retype it and give it one more eye over that everybody could be on the same page. And this way, we can take out the strikeouts and put in, this is the language that we're recommending prior to us submitting it to the board for approval.
Yeah, and I
you
would
fine with
definitely
that?
suggest getting whatever the latest that NCSBA has taken, so that when Crystal types them over, she'll know specifically what was NCSBA and what was ours.
Okay.
Because we need to definitely make sure we get the NCSBA stuff.
Right, and I think
And she can get that from McKenna.
Yeah, I
or
think that we
Jason.
did. I don't think that this was in this most recent substantial changes, but, and then the counseling program 3610. This came back from December's board meeting, and I postponed it last meeting so that we could take care of some other business that you had suggested, Ms. Grable. And so, in some of the language, I know that it kind of interchanged individual and group counseling, and I had raised concern about NCDPI had specific guidance for when it comes to group counseling, and I put my notes up on my computer, so you guys have, this is the changes that were proposed back in December to the board meeting. So the blue and the strikeouts is not coming from me, this is coming from what we had, and so to discuss where we're going. So on the first page, the underlined career, academic, social emotional development needs of the student population. The program will include individual and group counseling, classroom presentations, academic advising, career development services, consultation, parent education, and other responsive services. And so I was wanting to discuss some tighter language to talk about with our counseling program. And let me see.
So are you suggesting that the things in blue were from the NCSBA?
Stepping into this role, I think this was a recommendation from policy, and I'd have to assume that many of them came from the NCSBA changes. Yes, ma'am.
Because I don't remember, in the things that I have pulled up before we've been through this policy many times. And so some of these things, these are the first time I'm seeing them. And I keep track of all of the NCSBA ones. So this is another one of those ones that, because there's so many strikeouts and we don't know who did what, that I think that we need to go back through that one as well.
Okay, just so that we're all on the same page, the one that we are discussing in front of us and the one that's on assembly is what's in our packet. And so I don't know where the latest or, in between versions were. So if we start from there so that we're all on the same page. So looking at the blue, this is just the first paragraph.
And blue comes from whom? And red comes from whom? Or do we know?
That's where there's been some mix-up, and that's probably partially my fault too, whenever I was editing some of them. And so when we were setting the agenda for today, we just did the most recent that was documented. And then we'll discuss, and as a committee, we'll determine the path forward with words.
And committee members, if my memory serves correctly, this policy came before the policy committee in the fall.
It
With the
did.
blue changes being the changes recommended by the School Boards Association. And in that meeting, the policy committee, under academic guidance on page 1, letter A, made a change with regards to using more expansive language instead of just accelerated college entry, but other post-secondary opportunities. So it's my memory that blue came from the School Boards Association, and then the language in red was added by the policy committee either in October or November.
And I think for me, some of the feedback and changes really focuses on that first paragraph. Looking over the rest, I felt good about, and so for me, the conversation, if you look at that last few sentences, starting with the school counselor program will mirror the American School Counselor Association model for school counseling and meet the objectives of the State Board of Education Comprehensive School Counseling Program. And I was going to suggest academic, career, and individualized developmental needs of student populations. And then I would like some, like I said, some more defined verbiage between individual and group counseling. And so looking at NCDPI, they talked about habitual attendance, traumatic instances that affect a majority of the population of when group counseling occurs. And so that is where the discussion on my behalf, what I wanted to lead with today. And I know I'm looking at you, Ms. Varnum, because I think you're that person too.
So we implement the ASCA national model, the American School Counselor Association Comprehensive School Counseling Program model, and those are components of that, and that model is a very in-depth process that helps counselors define how they will support students on an individual basis. Again, a school counselor supports individually in a short-term capacity. They don't maintain, individual counseling over a long period of time with students. And then group counseling is based on the framework that the ASCA national model creates. So that's kind of the standardized approach.
I mean, is it possible then to split that last sentence into two, to have an individualized sentence and then one that focuses on group counseling sentence? And maybe you can help us with the words with that?
I would be comfortable pulling that from the ASCA national model language.
Okay. Well, if you were able to do that, then I think that for me, that's where my conversation came part of, and I don't know if you ladies have any other things to add.
I'm concerned about group counseling, yeah. I'd want it to be a little bit more specific that would yeah.
And Ms. Barnhart, for clarity, are you suggesting giving examples? So an example of individual counseling and examples of group counseling?
Well, and I kind of discussed this with some of the staff to say, I understand if we're going to start naming things, then we're inherently going to leave something out, right? Or we're going to be tied to, if we did not do a group counseling when this happened at a specific school or something. So I think I'm comfortable with splitting apart individualized counseling and group counseling and acknowledging that both of those are taking place, but that it's a separate criteria, if you will. And I don't know what that looks like. And so that's why I'm, looking at Ms. Varnum to.
So one, I can
Thank you.
help. Whenever counseling takes place in this, like if you're doing group counseling or individual group counseling, there is parental consent. So let's say it's divorce, parents going through a divorce. So
Right.
the parent may reach out to the counselor, let the counselor know this is what's going on. We'd love for you to have a conversation with our child to help them. And the counselor would say, yes, that's fine. Get your written permission. I have group counseling. There's a group of kids that I work with, and that's what that looks like. Parent consent, it may be a boys group or a girls group. It may be, some behavioral management. If that is the case, then parents or guardians are involved and they're aware of those counseling. And if there's something that's going on outside of the home, they'll contact the counselor and say, well, this is what happened. You may want to talk with them about this, just to make you aware. So when counseling comes into place, unless it's actually involving the parent per se, someone else will know. The parent and the counselor are hand in hand.
I know that we're coming up.
And also, are we saying that we're going to hold this one in policy also?
Yes, and I would
Okay.
like for Ms. Barnum to help develop that language, and you can reference where you need to kind of split those two sentences to address those independently.
And I would ask that we also just make sure that we're cross-referencing this policy with 1310 to make sure that in letter C4, where it's talking about counseling programs, that we're talking the same language in both of them.
Thank you for that. And I know that we're coming up on time, and we have some other commitments today. So the next on the agenda was those minor amendments from NCSBA. And realistically, looking over these collective whole,
Is that the one that's, 6 policy amendments from?
yes,
NCSBA?
ma'am. It's the board member compensation, online instruction, concussion and head injury, use of unmanned aircraft and drones, school meal and competitive food standards, and crowdfunding on behalf of the school. So for the sake of time, I'm going to entertain a motion to postpone this to the next meeting.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then coming on to the last one, I'm going to call you out, Dr. Faison. Do you want to try to tackle the policy that we talked about? Okay, so if we go on to the substantive policy agenda, looking at
You know, we
policy-
only have 6 minutes before the
Yes,
meeting's
ma'am.
over.
3460, graduation requirements, and the reason why is because, wait, was it 3460 or 20, sorry. So there were some substantial language changes with that, but Dr. Faison had found some inconsistencies and wanted to address those so we could fix those moving forward. So Dr. Faison,
Tell me where I find that, please.
3420, it is student promotion and accountability. And this, the policy that you have today should have the changes already from NCSBA. And I'm gonna get my cheat sheet out while you chat, Dr. Faison, and I'll read what the changes were.
Probably in the back of the other. It's in the back of the other.
The reason why we asked that this policy be brought forth on the district end is we have a discrepancy with our policy and our curriculum guide. And if I will direct your attention to letter J, number 2. And under that, letter A, the policy currently reads that students must earn a letter grade of C or lower to repeat the course. That should be a D or lower to repeat the course. And this is a change that we thought initially was in place due to being aligned with the larger districts in our state and the reputation of our transcript to make sure that we are aligned and there's no questions there. So we're asking that that be changed to D instead of C, which is currently in our curriculum. I'm sorry.
So we did this, was this one last year, year before last? And we have it recorded, it just didn't make it. So if you go back through the minutes, it reflects in the minutes, it just doesn't reflect in our policy. And so it was changed previously, and then we found out that it wasn't actually changed in the actual policy that you have.
And I'm comfortable with those changes. And looking at my notes from NCSBA, the other changes that were drawn up that you see here today is required, a language change in section N due to a new statute in the law. So N.
I don't see that, there's no lines on it on mine. Letter N. There's no change markings.
I don't see that either, but I'm just reading what the C required notes of where they changed stuff from.
Well, read it out loud, please. So we can find it.
Section N, due to the new statute, General Statute 115C-407.12, sorry.
Because those aren't even listed in letter N.
I said
This is
115
Jason.
at the
I
bottom.
believe the changes that are being referenced are in your policy section O. Those are the changes with regards to active and inactive members of the military.
Yeah, so like on my cheat sheet, it says section N, but looking here, it looks like it's actually section O
Yeah.
for General Statute 115C-407. And yeah, I think so North Carolina, it says North Carolina participates in interstate compact on educational opportunity for military children.
Right.
An agreement among states as alleviate many of the educational transitional issues with military families to encounter certain barriers of enrollment. The state law implements the compact and applies to children of military families defined as school-age children in K through 12 in the household of an active duty member. And extends the benefits of compact to children of certain inactive members of the National Guard or Reserves. We have changed the definition of children and military families in policy 4050, children of military families, to also include the children coverage by that law. So it's really just a legal reference changes in that.
And then I want to draw your attention to letter F, number 3. Digital Children Reading Initiative. And the last line, the last part of that line, where it says we'll provide printable activities, we want to add digital access at home. We want to add per request, so we'll know who actually does not have digital access at home.
So
So printable activities from those resources will be provided in hard copy to students who do not have digital access at home per request.
per parent request or?
Parent request is
Okay.
fine. We just said per request, but it could be parent request.
And if the committee is going to make that change, I would recommend it read upon parent request instead of per parent request.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I'm comfortable with that. Dr. Faison, did you have any other things with this particular policy to add?
That is it. Thank you.
Thank you. If the committee is willing, I'm comfortable with submitting this forward to the board meeting in March. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, I didn't get a second, sorry. So I moved that we,
second,
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that's gonna pass, and then I'm gonna make a motion to table the remaining substantive policies, and we'll just pick them up next month when we come back together. Do I
Okay,
have a second?
So, can we also just recap what we're doing, like on your sheet?
Yeah, let's resolve this motion first. So I'd like, all in favor? Aye, to move them to the next board meeting. And then, any opposed? Okay, so recap before adjournment, we are going to be moving policy 4400, attendance, forward to board meeting. Policy 3420, which is student promotion and accountability, forward to the board meeting. We had discussed continuing looking into in 4400 about the potential opportunity.
Wait,
I'm sorry,
what was this thing you said after attendance?
3420.
Oh,
Which
okay.
is student promotion and accountability.
Okay.
So those two are going to be moving forward to the board meeting. We had discussed keeping 4400 to discuss a potential opportunity for amendment.
Do you mean 4720?
4720.
Well, 4720, we need to redo the language, and I'll work on and get with people with that. But then 4400, we had discussed the potential opportunity to look into what it would look like to have a committee if we wanted to explore the option as a board, to just get further clarification. But that's not we did not mandate that it's going to happen. We just wanted to explore the opportunity as well as.
I am not certain I'm following.
But we're going to discuss some more stuff later. Is that
Yes,
just what you're saying?
yes.
Okay, all right, gotcha.
Yes.
Hold on, see.
There's only two moving forward, Ms. Crable, and then there is one being kept in committee with another one discuss of looking into.
Which one? I have down that we were going to rewrite clean up 4720
Yes,
and
ma'am.
3610.
Yes.
So that's two of them. Because there's so many changes that we're gonna
3610.
retype them all, and then we're gonna look at them again in a clean
There was
format.
not that many changes for 3610, but yes, Ms. Farnham is going to give some direct language for the changes in that, yes, in that first paragraph. So 3610 is also held in committee. And then with what you brought up today, I put that we're going to discuss that 3620 for next month as well. So that's where we're at. And with that, I'll take a motion for adjournment. So moved. I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. 1 minute over. Sorry about that.